Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack what is honestly one of the most frustrating medical paradoxes of our time. We're going to look at how a historic, triumphant cure for a genuinely terrifying disease somehow turned into a devastating global bottleneck. It's a story of incredible global collaboration, massive amounts of public funding, and then a deeply infuriating legal gridlock. So let's just dive right into it. You know, for decades, the Ebola virus was this deadly, almost unconquerable threat. For nearly half a century, we had absolutely zero treatments. Actually, scratch that. It was more like a complete medical standstill. Tropical diseases affecting rural, lower-income regions just don't offer the massive financial payouts that normally drive fast pharmaceutical development. But then, by 2020, against all odds, the medical world achieved something amazing. We got not just one, but two FDA-approved treatments for the Zaire Ebola virus. It was a massive win for humanity. But here is the shocking reality on the ground. During 5 major outbreaks in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Guinea between 2020 and 2022, only 34% of confirmed Ebola patients actually got these life-saving drugs. Just 34%. Think about that for a second. We literally solved the medical puzzle. We have the cure. And yet the vast majority of people facing the virus, when an outbreak hits, just aren't getting it. They're dying from a preventable tragedy simply because the drugs are stuck. To really grasp this paradox, we have to remember the deeply human reality behind the medicine. These treatments, they weren't just magically invented in a vacuum by isolated scientists in some fancy corporate tower. The survivors themselves literally gave their blood. Their clinical samples, taken during harrowing, chaotic outbreaks, provided the vital antibodies that researchers needed to map the virus and build the cures. The entire foundation of this medicine is fundamentally human. Section 1. A historic scientific breakthrough. Let's trace how we actually got here. Ebola was first discovered way back in 1976. But for decades, because it primarily hit rural communities in Central Africa, global research funding was practically non-existent. That completely changed during the horrifying 2014 West Africa outbreak. When the virus suddenly crossed borders and became a global threat, the international funding floodgates finally opened up. That rush of energy led straight to the 2018 Palm trial in the DRC, a brave, first-of-its-kind randomized drug trial right in the middle of a conflict zone. And finally, in 2020, the FDA officially approved the therapies. Now, I want to emphasize something absolutely crucial. This was not a solo victory for a single pharmaceutical company. No way. It was a messy, beautiful, unprecedented global collaboration. You had public researchers, ministries of health from affected nations, the World Health Organization, and frontline NGOs like Doctors Without Borders, all working shoulder to shoulder in secure labs and temporary field tents. Together, they proved that these two therapies, REGN-EB3 and MAB114, actually saved lives. Which brings us to Section 2. Who funded the cure? $800 million. Let me put that into perspective. That is nearly $1 billion in public funds. Your tax dollars poured directly into the research, development, and advanced procurement of these treatments. The massive financial risk of getting a brand new antiviral drug through clinical trials, the public sector absorbed all of it. We footed the bill. It was built on this incredibly diverse web of public support. U.S. agencies like BARDA, the NIH, the Department of Defense. It took intense cooperation from the DRC Ministry of Health, essential samples from courageous survivors, and the total dedication of medical NGOs out on the most dangerous front lines in the world. The whole operation rested on public investment and immense human risk. So logically, you'd think the public would have a major say in how the cure gets used, right? Well, right at the climax of this massive victory, we hit a deeply frustrating systemic failure. It's a twist that stops the whole success story dead in its tracks. We found the cure, so where the heck is it? Prepare to be frustrated, because despite the breakthrough, neither treatment is officially registered in any endemic country today. Just imagine for a second being on a frontline medical team. You're suited up in heavy, suffocating protective gear in sweltering heat, fighting an outbreak, and you don't have reliable access to the approved cure. Instead of just grabbing a registered public health tool off the shelf, these doctors have to jump through crazy bureaucratic hoops and rely on ad hoc donations while their patients are literally dying. The visual irony here is honestly agonizing. On one hand, you have the U.S. Strategic National Stockpile locking away tens of thousands of doses primarily for domestic biosecurity, in a country that doesn't even naturally have Ebola outbreaks. And on the other hand, the countries where the virus actually strikes, where the risk is a daily reality, are left staring at empty shelves, just hoping for emergency charity donations to treat a handful of patients. Let's investigate why in Section 3, Patents, Prices, and Stockpiles. The bottleneck really comes down to legal rights. The US government actually went and handed over exclusive patent rights for one of the drugs, MAB114, to a single private company called Ridgeback Biotherapeutics. They effectively granted a private monopoly on a discovery that, up until that exact second, had been entirely funded by public tax dollars and built on the backs of public health workers. Let's look at the financial math behind this monopoly, because it's pretty wild. It costs roughly $750 to actually manufacture a large-scale treatment course of Regen EB3. Yet the estimated price the US government pays to buy it back for the stockpile? Around $6,900 per course. That is a massive, almost 10 times markup being charged back to the exact same government and the exact same taxpayers who funded its creation in the first place. And if you want the absolute perfect example of how completely broken this system is, get this. The sole global supplier for MAB114, the company holding that exclusive monopoly license, doesn't even have its own in-house manufacturing capability. Since they have to outsource all their production, there are massive logistical delays. New doses aren't expected to hit the supply chain for years. They own the exclusive rights to the cure, but they literally can't even make it themselves. Okay, Section 4, a fair path forward. So, how do we fix this broken system before the next major global health crisis? First, we need an accessible, globally managed stockpile run by the UN and WHO instead of just hoarding doses in non-endemic countries. Second, if public money is used to research and develop a drug, governments must legally attach strict, affordable pricing conditions before handing it over to the private sector. And finally, we absolutely have to transfer the manufacturing technology directly to endemic regions, so they can just produce their own life-saving medicines when an outbreak hits. Future R&D simply has to prioritize public health over private monopolies. We can never forget how this medicine came to be. Survivors risked their lives donating blood, and everyday taxpayers donated their money to create a cure for the world. It was a triumph of human cooperation. It was never ever meant to be a hoarded commodity, locked behind patent walls and exorbitant price tags while frontline clinics sit empty. Which leaves us with a pretty critical question to chew on. If the next major pandemic hits tomorrow, are we actually going to share the cure with the people who need it most? Or are we just going to stockpile it behind red tape? Because right now, the way we manage our greatest scientific triumphs might just be our greatest vulnerability. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the system, and I'll catch you next time.